get a little past 3:30. I would like to welcome everyone today. My name is Kiki Hartman and I'm president of PRSSA. We are super excited to have Laura joining us today and we can't wait to hear you speak. We do have guest speakers often here at PRSSA, and if anyone is interested in checking that, those are available on our website at siupurssa.com. And without further ado, I'll let Haley introduce our guest.
Hi, everyone. I'm Haley. We are so fortunate to welcome Laura Matalon as our guest speaker today. She graduated from Northwestern University and has an extensive resume. Currently, she serves as the Chief Marketing Officer for Hamilton. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking your time to be here and speaking with us. We are so excited to hear about your journey in marketing, and we will take questions at the end. So, Laura, the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for inviting me here today. I've had an interesting journey to get to where I am with Hamilton, and my background for many, many years in the early part of my career was entirely in public relations, and entirely by accident. I was a theater major at Northwestern, theater and speech education, and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. I went into school thinking I wanted to be an actress. And came out of school knowing I didn't want to be an actress, in great part because I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't really dedicated to be good enough. So when I got out of school, my roommates and I all moved to Washington, D.C. It was extremely arbitrary. We all knew somebody there. We thought we could get a job. And I actually got a job with a PR firm that was corporate PR, handling law firms and real estate developers. And it was a really interesting time. It was a very small firm. They did a lot of crisis PR, in addition to being at the forefront of law firm PR. And I had a front row seat to really be able to learn and understand what that business was. And so I learned about the public relations business and the publicity business. I also learned about business in general. And I had been there for a couple of years, and my roommates and I were like, we don't love Washington, D.C. Our careers, this isn't necessarily what we want to be doing. And so we had saved up a little bit of money at the time, and we said, okay, we could either take the money we saved and go to Europe and do this, thing and have this wonderful time and come back and look for jobs, or we could buy new spring wardrobes and stay in these jobs and see where we want to go. So you can guess what we did. And when we got back from an amazing trip to Europe, I moved to Chicago, which is where I was originally from, and I still had some family here. So I got a job, entry level at a PR firm, again, doing corporate things, and I was handling calcium chloride pellets was my big client. And it was awful, and I hated it. And calcium chloride pellets, for those of you who don't know, are the stuff you throw on the snow so that it melts the snow. It's those little ice pellets that you track in your house, and they're so annoying. But they too needed public relations. And my big idea for them was when Cardinal Bernardin, I'm pointing as if you know I live right off the street, Cardinal Bernardin, who has his big house on Lincoln Park in Chicago, he was in the news because he had a very bad slip and fall on the ice. So we sent him a whole lot of calcium chloride pellets and got some press for that. But it really wasn't for me. So at the time I was working I moved to another PR firm and was working in the destination and lifestyle space. I was a theater kid. I missed being in the theater. I missed going to the theater. So I had a friend out of Texas who was working for a theatrical producer. And he invited me every time he would come to Chicago with one of the big shows, he'd ask me to be his date. And I would always go. And one time he called me, he said, hey, do you want to go on the road with the show? And I said, I don't even know what that means, but okay. So I did. And they flew me to Texas for a weekend where they were based. And they said, okay, here's what the job is. And all of a sudden I was literally thrown into, you have to deal with all of the advertising. You have to deal with all of the publicity. You have to deal with everything that it takes to get the show sold and sell tickets. And I was on a show called Singing in the Rain, and it would move every week from city to city. and I would move with the show. So I was on the road for many years, myself moving from show to show, from Singing in the Rain to South Pacific, and the most amazing learning experience imaginable. You literally get thrown into something, you sink or you swim. And they had a couple of shows going out that year, and there were 3 of us who had absolutely no experience whatsoever. And they threw us all in the water, and 2 of us really swam, and it wasn't for the 3rd one. And that's okay, because it's certainly not for everybody. But I managed to parlay all of that experience, all of those contacts, which are really critical, into a career in the theater, which I never imagined in a million years that I would be able to have. And I have been so fortunate and so lucky to sort of, with shows on either side of it, but to really 20 years, starting with Rent and going to Hamilton, and the Book of Mormon and Wicked and Mamma Mia and all of these gigantic shows in between. So I've been really, really fortunate. I built a company of publicists and marketing directors, because the role of a show publicist is really more of a marketing function as it's developed and evolved. Although today and yesterday, I was dealing with all of our press things. My team is unfortunately furloughed right now. So what's really interesting is, because I come from a true publicity background, and many of the people that I have subsequently trained and have hired come from this theatrical press background, they're not true publicists in the true sense of the term. And I'm sure you know from your studies and for what you're doing in your group, the people that are working for me aren't necessarily out writing pitch letters, pitching stories. They are creating and establishing relationships with some media across the country. But really, we're on the publicity side, we're the liaison between our show and every city that we go to. So there's a different publicist on the ground in every single city. So in any given day, we're working with 10, 20, however many publicists. But to get to the show, they have to come through us. And so we design a strategy, we design pitch ideas, and we really try to control and craft the message around our show. So we provide talking points for when a show comes to town. We provide the basic templates for all the press releases. They just fill in local information. So it's interesting, because sometimes then we'll go to a city where you have a very creative and thoughtful publicist who wants to do more than this sort of box, this toolkit we send them. And we have been able to be more collaborative and open ourselves up to doing other things. So San Francisco is a great example of a publicist there who didn't just want to do what they were told. And so he was constantly, continues to bring us ideas, partnerships, promotional relationships, all that have a publicity component to them. And then over the past 5-7 years, the evolution of the role of the publicist is so dramatic, because of influencers, because of the changing landscape of media, because of how much more you need to know, how much more familiarity you have to have with every single social platform, how you advise that social platform fits into the mix. And I have to say, I'm really happy that I'm not a publicist anymore, because I feel like it is just landmines, because there's almost nothing you can, because everything is amplified so much in a different way. There is nothing that you can do that isn't going to piss somebody off or get some kind of reaction online. And, you have to have a team that you're working with and for that's all on the same page about if and how you want to respond to certain things and how things take care of themselves. I'm fortunate that I work for a brand that gets a lot of attention and publicity, a lot. And it's not always true what's put out there, and it's not always represented accurately. And so I don't know if any of you are familiar with what happened when in the wake of Donald Trump's election in 2016, and Mike Pence went to see Hamilton. And our creative team, Kiki's smiling, she remembers, our creative team, along with some of the actors, created a statement that they wanted to read from the stage, to just ask Mike Pence in the new administration to make sure that everybody was represented in the policies and things that they were going to be doing. And it was very respectful. If you were in the House, you knew that. And people, we got into a Twitter war with the president-elect of the United States. Who could have ever imagined that something like that would happen? Now, what got out in the world and how Donald Trump represented it was completely inaccurate, what happened. And even Mike Pence, when he did some interviews in the aftermath of it, tried to correct the record. But that's not what was out there. And that's still, I don't want to say it haunts us, it still follows us. Sometimes if we're announcing that we're coming to a town, could be in Texas, it could be in Alabama, it could be wherever it is, we have people on our social pages, I'm never, or sending a note to the theater, I'm never coming to your theater again. You disrespected the president and the vice president of the United States. We don't engage. We just don't. It kind of takes care of itself on social. We're in the fortunate position that if they're not interested, people aren't interested in purchasing tickets, then there's somebody else, fortunately, who will. And we understand that our actions have consequences. And for many years, up until this past election cycle, we were very distinctly nonpartisan in how we approached everything. We were extremely, extremely nonpartisan or bipartisan, even though our creative team wears their affiliations on their sleeve, really. And then we did a fundraiser for Joe Biden. It just got to be too much. We were doing so much in voter activation space. It just got to be too much, and we put a stake in the sand. We did a fundraiser for Joe Biden. We then did a fundraiser for the candidates in Georgia, the single most successful fundraiser they did. And again, we had not a lot, but we had people sending a note to us, take me off your mailing list, I want my money back, blah, 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 blah. And you know what? Everybody has a right to their own opinion. We would like everybody who's interested to come see our show. We don't want to keep anybody out, but some people were feeling unwelcome, and we understand that that's a consequence. What's been interesting about that, again, as both the publicist and the marketing director, because the job that I've been doing for the last 30 years has changed so dramatically in the last 12 months because of how we've had to pivot. And so my job fundamentally is to sell tickets. And anything that touches selling a ticket, whether it's working on the ticket pricing, working with group sales, working with the education department, putting together the playbill that you're going to see, doing an advertising plan, a community engagement plan, a press plan, all that went away. And I have been so busy because we pivoted to social activism. And we were already going to be doing a lot of work in the get out the vote space when we were in performances. We had a whole campaign set and ready to go, which obviously we couldn't do anymore. But since last July, effectively, particularly in the wake of everything that happened with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, we have really moved into this social activist space and are leaning into relationships with, and again, really from August through the end of the year, through January was focused on voting, but established some strategic partnerships with Vote Forward, Swing Left, Vote Riders, Color of Change, Black Lives Matter, all these organizations. And we were doing all kinds of PSAs, fundraisers, events. Now we've pivoted and we've created a whole new channel, Instagram channel. That's our Ham for Progress channel, which is because eventually we're going to get back to selling tickets. That's my job. But we've morphed now to have the social activist channel so we can continue to do that good work, but not have it to be the main thing that's happening in our main feed, because our goal is to sell tickets. I mean, people forget we actually are a commercial business, but really woke up to the fact that we had some corporate social responsibility beyond what we had previously been doing. And it's been extremely, extremely rewarding for me to work in this space. And now that a bunch of cities are starting to announce the show is coming back, people are going on sale with their subscription campaigns. I'm being dragged back into my regular job, and it's like, oh, okay, I got to approve your artwork and blah, 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 blah. So it's been a one crazy year for everybody at every level. I'm grateful that for a lot of things, but primarily that I work on this show that has such a significant cultural footprint and the impact that we have, and to be able to not only do the traditional press and marketing, but to do these, we have a very robust education program, some of you may know about, doing all of the social activism work, and it's just growing and continuing. It's fantastic. So the job of the publicist in this day and age, I think, unless you're going into, say, entertainment PR, has really changed a lot. And I think having a background and a familiarity with and an understanding of what it takes to be an effective communicator is very helpful down any path that you may pursue down the line. I'm not sure what I was supposed to talk about today, Haley.
That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just captivated listening to you. So, well, if you're ready,
questions, I'm ready.
So, Haley, do you want to do? We'll call on people, and you guys can just use the reaction buttons to raise your hands or send a thumbs up if you have a question. I can't see your faces, so okay, good. Madison, do you have a question?
I know, did you ever meet LinManuel Miranda's?
I have.
No way.
Many times. In fact, I've worked with Lynn since In the Heights in 2007. So the nice thing is about working on this show, and my associate who's on furlough, who's our communications director, he also worked with me on In the Heights. And so he is as genuine and as delightful as he comes across. And his family is very heavily invested in philanthropy. And there are causes that are very near and dear to their heart, which become near and dear to our heart. And they are amazing collaborators, amazing. I'll tell you a funny inside story, funny to me anyway. I mentioned that I had worked on Rent. I also worked on another, if you know Rent at all, Jonathan Larson, the creator, had died of a brain aneurysm on the eve of its opening off Broadway, but he had written an earlier piece called Tick, Tick, Boom that didn't get produced in his lifetime, but got produced later. And Lin-Manuel is actually now directing a film version of Tick, Tick, Boom.
Oh, that's so cool.
And yesterday I got an email from Lynn that was asking about whether or not, now this is so long ago, we're going to have to really pull this out of the archives, but asking if we had any particular footage of Jonathan Larson speaking about different topics and how prescient he was and some of the things he said about what's happened with technology and in the world this many years later. So yes, I know Lynn.
How many times did you meet him?
I don't generally count.
Okay. So a lot then.
A number, yeah. One of the things, you're a little bit starstruck about Lynn, which is fine. I am too. But one of the things about being a publicist is that you have to be really careful about managing your own excitement and enthusiasm when you meet with and work with people who make you starstruck. And so you sometimes really have to keep yourself in check because you aren't going to be as effective for them if your fandom gets in the way. And I've seen situations where a fandom can get in the way of you being then trusted to take care of something in an appropriate way or how it should be taken care of. And so that's a very real thing that you have to be aware of for yourself.
Craig, you have a question?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Dr. Craig Ingstrom. I'm one of the faculty members here. Thank you for giving your time to our students. This has been wonderful. Just to sort of follow up on the question that Madison was asking, how much are you sort of involved in maybe giving advice or directing the voice of some of your clients versus taking their voice and then putting that into service of the kinds of products that you might put together for them, or press kits and so forth? So I guess to what degree is that like a give and take, and how do you sort of manage that when you think that you need to step in and maybe direct them a certain way and they might not want to hear that advice, obviously?
You know, it partly depends. It really depends on who the producer is, who the creative team are, and what level of involvement they want to have. So, for example, I did the Book of Mormon, and the creators of the Book of Mormon had a very specific tone of voice that they speak in. They had a very specific way they wanted to present themselves to the public. And while we could make some suggestions, we can put together a strategy of how we wanted to put this information out there and information we needed them to create for us. So we had tools. They didn't specifically want to hear from us on content. As it relates to Hamilton, if we're going to suggest something as it relates to content, and I work really closely with the digital team on this, we effectively know when we can just move and when we need to get approval. And the hierarchy of Hamilton now is that our COO knows the creative team well enough to be able to be the person we go to say, hey, we did a post yesterday that we had created, and we're like, hey, are we good to post this? And it was Chris Jackson reading a letter that from the founding era that we had filmed in front of Federal Hall. Is this whole thing. We thought it was fantastic. It was what we had all talked about creating conceptually, but now that it's done, we just wanted, the little sign off on it to make sure that it was going to meet everybody's needs. And then there's shows where, gazillions of shows out there where the creative team aren't involved, and, you sort of go and you do what you need to do. You have a sense of what the brand voice is because you're working on it from the beginning. Usually there's a style guide that's also created that really helps outline the brand voice, at least in our business. That's what we try to create.
Great, thank you.
Hi, Laura. This is Justin Young. I'm another faculty member here in the meeting. When you talked about creating a style guide, could you maybe go a little bit into like what sorts of things would be in a particular style guide? What would be maybe distinctly different between, say, the Hamilton style guide and the In the Heights or the Wicked style guide?
So one of the things that we try to do, our teams, as we're working on a show, is think about all of the different aspects of the show, thematically and otherwise, that we would want to suggest as story pitches. And we would effectively write a pitch. And it could be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, however many different stories we feel that we might want to tell on the road. Because remember, we're not pitching the stories, we're giving story ideas to the local publicists so that they can pitch the stories. And we used to, and shows still do, Hamilton hasn't done that, we would then actually write some of the stories so that we also had, and again, this is sort of in the last few years, things have changed, but we would also write some of those stories because there were a lot of outlets out there that just would pick something up and run it. So we would sometimes actually hire journalists to write the stories in a very specific and very particular style so that they could easily just be picked up and run in a newspaper, in a playbill, to be put in a magazine or in a communication to subscribers and whatnot. So that's part of that publicity style guide. Obviously, we're any kind of photos and images would have to be approved. That goes in the style guide, and then B-roll, which is the footage from the show, that is part of that style guide. So that, and then in the case of Hamilton, we have a general, you might have a general casting release, the release about the lottery, a general on sale release. So we would have the templates for those releases also as part of a style guide that people could then localize at the appropriate point in their campaign. And then there's a toolkit of all of the brand assets that are used for advertising and marketing. And then there's a separate toolkit for all of the social and digital assets that we might use. And so sometimes we have all of these social assets that people are welcome to use and adapt. We all tend to be controlling because we have to control our brand in 50, 60, 70, 80 cities that we're going to, whatever the show is. So the more that we create for the markets to use, the more we can control how the brand is presented. So anytime we work with the market and they want to do something that's different or that we don't already have, they'll reach out to us for approval. And then they have great ideas. So sometimes we'll incorporate those into other, things that we haven't thought of. So I just got a request from the LA Times actually yesterday. I was dealing with right before this call, and it's annoying me because it's an article that's on this actress, and the LA Times, it's been a year now since they started having conversations about this article, and it's gone in a bunch of directions, and now they want to talk to somebody about the casting process for this one particular actress. And the casting process for her is no different than the casting process for this one. But it's like, really, you haven't talked about us in a year. We never actually opened. This isn't really the story that I care about putting out there. And now's not the moment to do it. So I don't want to call in a favor and get you this interview now. I know you're at the LA Times, but so it's our job to help refocus it and redirect it into a direction that we want it to go.
Grace, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Laura, if you could talk a little bit about the differences in entertainment PR versus what you do.
So what you mean when I referred to entertainment PR before?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I really meant was more like celebrity PR. So personal PR. So I think working for an individual person or a sports, it's really celebrity PR is what I was referring to. We do entertainment PR. Celebrity, public relations in general is like a 24/7 thing. You are on call all the time because something inevitably happens. Yesterday, our day was completely derailed by a piece that ran that said Hamilton was going to open on Broadway on July 4th, 25% capacity, $1,000 a ticket. This is absolutely not true information, not true information. And the source it came from is like a broker, but the amount of people calling to ask us about it was like, it's not true, and how we deal with that. So you are on call all the time, and no matter how well your day is planned, Tiger Woods gets into an accident. Imagine if you were Tiger Woods' publicist. Just imagine the chaos anyway of being Tiger Woods' publicist, and then he has an accident. So being a personal publicist, that's what I was really meaning. That's a whole different kettle of fish. As to what you're trying to accomplish, because you're part of a team that's helping to shape a brand, and that brand happens to be an individual. We work with the director of Hamilton, his name is Thomas Kail, and he's a noted director. He's done all amazing things, and he is now married to and has a baby with Michelle Williams. So what do you think people want to talk to him about? He didn't want to talk about it. So if we just set up all these interviews for him because we're opening in Australia, and the caveat was he will talk about the show all you want, but that's what he talks about. He's never talked about his personal life. He's not going to start now. But for other people, LinManuel has a personal publicist who I work very closely with, who's fantastic. And at some point, so in the case of LinManuel, you're almost in like, you're just being bombarded with stuff. It's not even like at this point in his career, you're planning and shaping what it's going to look like. So what you're doing now is planning and shaping around the fact that he's up for these Golden Globes and how we deal with that. And, when the movie came out and all of those things, where there's other artists who are in the show who don't have as much recognition, who have their own personal publicists, and they're trying to get them some attention in a different kind of way. So personal publicity is a very interesting thing. I represented, there's a magician, you guys are also young, you probably don't know, his name is David Copperfield, if anybody's heard of him. And David Copperfield was on the road for years and years and years, and he was very particular. And David Copperfield, because it was this one person show, and he was traveling from city to city, it was a lot of interviews. So I knew that David Copperfield's assistant was the one on the phone pretending he was David Copperfield doing these interviews, answering all the questions, because he knew the answers to the questions. So one night I'm at home, and I don't know, it's Sunday night at 4, whatever time it was, and I get a phone call from the assistant that said, "Don't say anything to the press." He starts babbling on. I was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, I guess he cut his finger off during one of the tricks. So it was like, it became this whole thing for days of dealing with how we manage this accident that David Copperfield had, how we wanted to spin what got put out there. So it's, you cannot predict what's going to happen. It's exciting, but it is 24/7.
Thank
Okay,
you. That really clarified it.
yes. I have a different question for you that kind of relates to PR, but just also your personal preference. On like a publicist PR standpoint, have you had like a favorite show that was just fun to work with the creative team or with the local publicist?
Yeah, I mean, Rent was a tremendous amount of fun. We got to do a lot of different things. You know what? I kind of have fun on Hamilton's great. In the Heights, because the team was so wonderful, was good, but it was hard. No one knew who he was then. The movie, by the way, I hear is amazing. But that was hard. I mean, we were able to get publicity, but we had a hard time getting people in the door to see it. Many years ago, I did a show called The Secret Garden, and I loved working on that show so much. Many years ago, early on. You know what? For the most part, I like them all.
That seems fair. I feel like working on that many, you just learn to love something in all of them.
Yeah.
Maggie, you have a question?
Yeah, so this more deals about like advice as someone trying to get into the industry, since PR and stuff in that general concept is high stress. What do you do to relieve some of that stress or to create boundaries in your life where you can like decompress from everything? Because Broadway is in the spot of is always in getting attention from everybody because of the audience that it has. So what is some advice that you have on decompressing?
I created a pandemic. I'm really actually not a good person to ask that question, because for a long time, and I owned my own company, which adds to that stress because you're responsible for a lot of people. But what I would really make sure to tell my people who worked for me and stayed with me for a really long time I would try to model for them behavior that wouldn't stress them out. So I would try not to do emails and send it to them on the weekend or late at night or have these unrealistic expectations. It is really hard to create those boundaries. And I think that I created for myself bad habits, and no one no one was noticing but me how hard I was working. It wasn't even so someone else noticed it. I just wanted to get the work done. You know what I mean? So I think you have to figure out what it takes for you to get the work done. My associate, John, who's amazing and does a really great job of getting it all done, but having what he needs to do for himself is he has to have his inbox at 0. How he does it, I don't know. But it keeps him calm. When I get my inbox down, I get calmer, but right now I have 1,500 in there. And until I get that down, and that could be 3-4 weeks ago, from now, it could be never, I'll be a little jittery. But I have started, as I get older, I really have started to, sorry, let me turn that off, to make sure that for me, that I'm exercising in the mornings when I know when I will and won't do things. So if I say I'm going to exercise in the afternoon, I know myself, I will never exercise in the afternoon, ever. I will find every excuse not to do it. So I just get up earlier and I exercise because that makes me feel better. So I get a ton done before the day even starts. Reading the newspaper makes me feel, I actually read a hard copy of the newspaper, but sitting down and understanding what's happening in the world before I start my day helps keep me calm. But I'm not a good person. I hear meditation is great. But I'm actually the worst person to ask.
Well, thank you for your response anyway.
Yes. Michael, did I see a physical hand for a question? I'll get to you in one sec, Craig.
Hi, so you mentioned COVID briefly. I was wondering, how are you guys approaching an alternative delivery system to Hamilton? Like, is there a consideration for some sort of online version or, promotion?
Have you heard of Disney Plus?
You guys are on there? I personally don't have Disney Plus.
Okay, if you're serious, you really have to have been under a rock. But it's interesting. Are you serious? You don't know that we've been on Disney Plus since July?
I don't own Disney Plus.
It doesn't even matter that you don't own Disney Plus. The amount of publicity, look at your colleagues are shocked. The amount of publicity that Hamilton on Disney Plus generated between last May and up until now is like internationally, like nothing you have ever seen before. So you're not interested in entertainment, which is fine, because that's sort of the medium it would be in. But we're on Disney Plus. We've been on since July. So that was not designed to actually even appear on Disney Plus as early as it did. The pandemic actually allowed us to put it out earlier. And there were some real questions about, we didn't know how long we were all going to be out of business. It's a challenge because we are a show. We are Hamilton. That's what we are. We create content for our social channels and all that, but this is what we are. We're a show. We're not a venue. We're not a producing entity, producing company. We're just a show. We don't even own the venue. So we're not even in charge of what the safety protocols are going to be when we come back into a building, because we have 5 companies in Hamilton. And when we open, it'll be even 5 different theaters at the same time. But the safety protocols aren't ours. So being with this show is a unique and interesting thing. And every other show is in the same boat, whether it's Frozen or Mean Girls or the Book of Mormon or anything else that is on Broadway or going on tour. We're just a show. So, and that's the business. So it's difficult to evolve the business because there's no money to do it with. We are, I think what will happen in general in the entertainment industry is that as a result of this, you're going to start to see more hybrid of digital as well as live performances. And so shows might do what Hamilton did in terms of spending the money to film their shows. The Prom, which was a show on Broadway that had closed prior to the pandemic, they had already sold the rights, and there was a TV movie of The Prom. And there was a musical called Diana the Musical, about Princess Diana, that was supposed to open shortly after the pandemic. And they went in and filmed it. So I don't know if I don't know that it's aired yet, but they're going to be in the unique position of having this show that's never been seen before air on television prior to it appearing on Broadway. So I think that you're going to start to see some different hybrid models.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Very interesting and extensive response. Craig, you have a question?
Sure. So for those students that are getting ready to enter the job market, what would you say are some of the maybe top 3 skills that are most sought after right now? And any advice that you might give to them, maybe even an example of how they might respond to an interview or look great in an interview?
Listen, my heart goes out to all of you who are looking for jobs in this environment. It's not going to be easy. But you will all get jobs. And even if you don't start out in a job that you love, you will get a job you love. And whatever job you start out with does not have to be the job you stick with for your entire life. So that's something to keep in mind. I think some of the critical skills, writing is a really important skill. It's a little bit of a lost art, I think. Being proficient in digital or social is really important. If you've created any content, either for your own platforms or for a project or something you've done, I think showing how you think strategically of how you might put that content out there is going to be important information to share. I know that as it relates to me, oftentimes when I have people come in and interview, I'll give them an assignment or a project to do. So be prepared for that. And it just, again, gives people a chance to see, there's not really any right or wrong in it, but to see how you think, how you might approach something. Your creativity is going to be really, really key. You're looking, all of you are probably, looking to go into this is creative side of the business. So be creative in how you present yourselves. And network. If there's an internship you can get, take an internship. If there's somebody who will allow you to shadow, so you can see what the job is, ask about shadowing. If you are interested in a specific area, whether it's corporate or entertainment or personal, do your homework. Research who the firms are, the organizations are that do that kind of work, so that you can really bring something to the table. And try, if possible, to have some kind of experience. If you want to be a non-for-profit, make sure you're volunteering somewhere in the communications department at a non-for-profit. Offer yourself up to volunteer. Keep busy.
Thank you. I'm sure that's really helpful. I know we have a lot of seniors approaching their graduation very soon and getting ready to enter a very turbulent job market.
Yeah.
Laura, I had a follow-up question. Since you talked about the amount of publicity that the release of Hamilton drew on Disney Plus, and I certainly don't know the field as well as you, but it seems like traditionally the ideal was you would hold back the film version of a play or a musical because you didn't want to hurt ticket sales. Hamilton on Disney Plus seems like it may have done the exact opposite of, like, really, so many people I know watched it for the first time there and now are desperate to go see it in a live theater. That seems like a significant change. Are there other significant changes like that you've noticed in recent years? Obviously, you mentioned social media earlier, but that have really affected your job?
You're absolutely right in that the release of the movie at that time, because originally it was supposed to release in movie theaters, but the release of it on Disney Plus has ignited interest in the show, and quite frankly, has helped us educate audiences internationally, because as we were getting ready to go on sale in Australia, they were like, they don't know what it is in Australia. We don't have a lot of Australian tourists in New York who have seen the show, blah, 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 blah. And my sales in Australia are through the roof. And there's no question it's related to that. But what's interesting is the conception that we have that releasing this at a certain point in the life of the show is going to hurt the show, or releasing something that's not good. And Rent is a really good example of it. That movie was terrible, of Rent, if anybody's seen it. Now, it's near and dear to my heart. It may be near and dear to your hearts because you watched it when you were 12, but it's not a great movie, but it doesn't matter. That Rent is still touring 25 years on. And people, that's the only entree that a lot of young people, many of you guys, I'm sure, had to see it, fell in love with it, and it's now coming around on stage and they want to see it on stage. So even there's a terrible Phantom of the Opera movie. There's Les Mis wasn't a great movie, but all of these movie releases have helped the stage production. So can you imagine what this movie of Evan Hansen is going to do for stage production? It's going to be amazing. So, but not every show should have a movie, you know. But I do think we are going to now see more and more. One of the sea changes will be the fact that I think the union, you know, one of the reasons not to do those things is so expensive with the unions. And then it's, you know, you're capitalizing a whole new thing and not everybody has the money to produce it. So I think that we are going to now start to see more of that. I think what you're seeing, if you've seen it on social, if entertainment is your bag, you know, we saw Ratatouille, the musical, this TikTok musical. We're seeing Bridgerton, the musical. Things are coming out of social platforms now that are actually informing some things that are happening in the real world of Broadway with performers, with writers. It'll be really exciting and interesting to see where that goes and how it takes off. So I really do think you're going to start to see much more of a hybrid model of presentations, because there's people who live in little teeny towns. Like Carbondale doesn't get the first class touring productions of things. It's a small town, doesn't support that, but doesn't mean the people in Carbondale aren't interested in seeing Hamilton or, you know, the Prom or whatever else.
Kind of a follow-up. Oh, sorry, Justin. Kind of a follow-up to that. Do you think that will lead to theaters and just shows in general taking the approach that Disney Plus did to when they released Mulan, the live action, is charging for their digital versions of shows to make up for a possible loss in ticket sales?
I don't know. You know, they got a lot of backlash for that, didn't they? Yeah.
I know personally, I haven't watched it personally for that reason. Like, it doesn't seem like it's worth it, especially without all the songs and music that like I grew up loving.
Well, it's if you're on Disney, if you're on Disney Plus, it's free now.
Ooh, okay, I might have to check it out.
Just so you know. And Mulan was one of my favorites because it was my daughter's favorite. So I will say, if you're a Mulan fan, you will miss the music, but it's really breathtaking, so it's worth watching. It's got a whole different storyline too to the part of it. So it's free now. So Kiki, I think you should watch it. Let me know what you think. Yeah, I don't know. I think that what people are learning, what I'm seeing theaters, I sit on the board of Victory Gardens Theater in Chicago, and I was on the board of Looking Glass. And what I've been watching the theaters do is how much they're charging for content now that they're streaming. And it's about $25 seems to be the threshold from what I'm seeing from all these different theaters. So I don't know if we'll see a world in which we talked about in this beginning, where let's say any show is playing at the theater downtown, but you can't make it because someone in your household had COVID, but you had tickets. Could we give you a link to stream it from your living room? But you will have already paid your $95, right? So you're going to stream it for $95 or not go. And so I do think that those are conversations worth having. And potentially you could increase the audience seeing it in a town. I think everything's on the table.
Definitely. Thank you. Do we have any last final questions as we approach the end of our time together? No? Oh,
I just want to say, Laura, I know how crazy busy you are, so thank you. If anyone didn't know, I DM'd Laura on Instagram. That's how this all started. So thank you for responding to that alone, as well as all of our emails.
It's a pleasure. I wish you all the very, very best. I know this isn't how you imagine spending your last year. And I'm sure you have as much Zoom fatigue as the rest of us, but I wish you all the very, very best as you embark in all of this.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure of mine, and I know it was a pleasure for my members, as well as those we have joining us outside of our PRSSA membership, for you to come and speak to us with your amazing expertise and your amazing catalog of shows that you've had.
I just want to say one thing that I neglected to say. I'm the member, the theater is an industry that is ruled by unions, including a publicists union. So I'm a member of the Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers. And if anybody on this call is particularly interested in theater, ATPAM are the initials, ATPAM. It's worth checking out their website. They have some programs for internships and other things. It's definitely worth checking it out. And if you have any questions, just let me know.
Definitely. Thank you once again, Laura. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.